Welcome, welcome, welcome. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Tonight we have our beloved Toni Val Martinez co-host sharing with us. And now for the first time we have Lilith Dorsey, well-known writer and all things witchy, community activist and leader. Lilith Dorsey is here to join us. And hopefully my audio will be in good form tonight. I live in Sixth Ward, Treme, and so first you hear a little soul music and a little R&B happening, right? And then as it gets a little darker and a little later, it turns into that bounce music, and then you can start to hear the traffic coming through the brick walls of the house. So you know there's a gathering going on. You know there's a celebration or party happening. And many of you know Tuba Fats Square and Candlelight Lounge is almost literally in my backyard. So this can happen on any given day or night, Monday through Sunday. And then you hear the brass band, and not just a regular brass band, but a whole school brass band. Now, mind you, I was tempted. I never opened the door. I never stuck my head out to see what was going on because I knew I had this podcast to attend to. Our next co-host has now joined us, Kim P. Ford with TreeShakersRadio.com. Welcome, Kim.
Greetings,
I'm going to
everyone.
do our greetings, and I certainly
Greetings.
welcome our listening audience. Greetings, welcome, peace and love, joy and salutations. Thank you so much for joining us again for our weekday night, 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time podcast. New Orleans Hoodoo, Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, sponsored by NONVD, New Orleans National Voodoo Day.org. You are now listening live and always in archive at your leisure and convenience to the Divine Prince, Pan African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Obeya Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, universal, evolutionary, healing, and holistic, and certainly revolutionary from a Pan African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective, understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. I will then have our beloved Lilith Dorsey introduce herself, and then after her, we will have Toni Val Martinez unmute her mic and introduce herself. And when our beloved Kim P. Ford gets her devices reconnected, we will bring her back on and also unmute her mic. So, at your leisure and your will, please, beloved Lilith, introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are, and if you will, what is voodoo? What does voodoo mean to you?
Oh, that's a huge question, but I'm Lilith Dorsey. I am a New Orleans style voodoo priestess. I've been practicing for almost 31 years now. I also have initiations in La Regla Kumi and in Haitian Vodou. I'm the author of 8 books now, many of them about New Orleans voodoo and different types of African traditional religion. I am a filmmaker. I did my undergrad and my grad. Sorry, I've got a puppy running around in the back. My undergrad and my grad at NYU. And I was also a dancer and choreographer for jazz legend Dr. John, who they said when we were at his memorial, he was the man responsible for putting Black people and white people on stage in America. So I miss Mac dearly. For me, voodoo is everything. It's about honoring the ancestors. It's about connecting with the land. It's about understanding who you are. It's about connecting with the dead. There's just so much. I don't think I can even put it into one word. You know, a lot of people try, but for me, it's almost everything. You know, it's just a connection to spirit. It's a connection to blood. It's a connection to energy and sacredness, and understanding that we're all connected to it too.
Yes, indeed. And we certainly wouldn't expect you to answer it and get it all in one podcast or in a hour length show. For certainly, we also want to welcome our returning listeners, long term listeners. Yes, Marie, thank you so much, beloved, for coming on in. Kawhi Goddess, thank you so much for coming in. Okay, please be patient with me. AT&T Wi-Fi hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot sponsored by AT&T. So please bear with me until I can get my Cox back. I have to rely on my AT&T Wi-Fi hotspot, and so it might freeze. It might lag. Take that moment to breathe and through the lag, and we'll come right back in. Thank you so much. Toni Val Martinez, beloved Queen Mother, please reintroduce yourself and give us a little bit about what voodoo means to you, and then we will move on to Kim P. Ford.
Hi, peace and blessings, everyone. I'm Toni Val Martinez, otherwise known as Sister Toni. Voodoo is a lifestyle to me. Growing up, we never discussed the things we did in our house as voodoo. It took me until I started searching our spirituality to realize that my mother, who was born in 1900, was practicing a lot of voodoo in our home. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh, I know what that's for. I know what that is. I know I did that. I know how to do that. And then to realize that it was voodoo, I just said, oh, well. And I did more research into what it was and was very happy with it. I wouldn't have expected anything else from my mother, being as how she grew up in the early 1900s and who her mother was and her grandmother was. And I was quite proud and very out in the open about it being voodoo, which at the time in the cities in the 70s and 80s and even in the 90s was really whispered. Oh, watch her, she do voodoo. But it was only to protect ourselves, our home, from the demons and enemies that my mother said were out there. And I believe are out there. I was an activist pre-Katrina, and I moved to Memphis and got away from the New Orleans scene and a lot of the people that I was working with moved to other cities and everything. And then when I came back to the city in 2014, life just got in the way. Trying to work, grandkids, kids, everything wasn't still settled with my family's living spaces, everyone wanting to move back to New Orleans and stuff. So it was a bit much. But I'm trying to get back into it. Most of my activism was with the prison industry in the state of Louisiana. I visited a lot of prisons, conversed with a lot of prison inmates over 15 years in a one-on-one type environment through letters, personal letters, handwritten, one-on-one discussions that they requested, conversations. Um, so I need to really get back into that, especially now with things being so politically turmoil.
Yeah.
I mean, my anxiety is so high. My spidey senses is what I call them. My spidey senses are so sharp right now. I just have anxiety about what's going to happen because of who the president of the United States is. And what foolish thing he might do that will cause repercussions to come on the citizens of this country. You know, my last name is Martinez, and I'm like, I'm not answering my door if somebody knocks and I don't know who they are, because he is so incompetent, and the agencies the people he have running his agencies are so incompetent. ICE might be coming to get me because my last name Martinez.
Yeah, I understand, beloved. And at some point in a future episode, I want us to discuss about ways in which we can indeed use, in the spirit of what came on, voodoo for liberation, revolution, upheaval, bounding, if you will, disruption. And certainly, I'm sure Lilith would have some information that she would also want to share in terms of how we, deal with that energy and fight that battle individually and certainly collectively as a community. Come on in, Kim P. Ford, please reintroduce yourself and then give us a little bit about what voodoo means to you. And then we're going to go into our discussion for tonight.
Okay, greetings everyone. I'm so honored to be able to be in your company tonight. Welcome, Priestess Lilith. First, I wish I had video, but I'm still working on that. But I am born and raised in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, and my grandmother had 51 grandchildren, and I was one of many, but I was one of her favorites. I consider myself because I learned how to follow the rules, right? And I helped her, and so she helped me too, to help to make my life easier. And I advocate for people. I'm not spiritual in voodoo directly, but I was born and raised. I was raised in the Catholic Church because three of my grandmother's brothers were ministers in the Baptist Church. But we were always a very spirit-filled family. Uh, we pretty much stayed to ourselves, even though it was a bunch of us. We had strict guidelines on how we operated, and we had rules for how we were to operate. And a lot of those things that my grandmother passed on to me keep me safe even now. Kept me safe during Katrina, and teaching me to teach my grandbaby to be safe as well. And I'm interested because I want to be able to hear about it, and I want to participate in the upcoming festival. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just glad to be here with you guys. And I might have to get off a little bit early tonight, but my heart and spirit is with you. And I can't wait to hear tonight's discussion.
Well, thank you kindly. We have about 45 minutes remaining in the show. We certainly appreciate anyone who's viewing, listening to us right now from YouTube or any of the other social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, my EarthCam page, my website, or any of the locations tonight and in the future that my co-hosts may also be streaming. We certainly invite you to type your questions or comments into the chat. Certainly, if there's something that you want us to answer and or address, we ask that you type in all capitals only at that time so that we can read out your question or comment, and then one of the co-hosts can indeed respond to it. Voodoo for me is first and foremost sort of a capsule of information. It's a umbrella word, if you will. We could ask the question, what is voodoo? Where is voodoo from? How do we spell voodoo? How did voodoo get here? And who practices voodoo? And just in those four questions, there's a composite capsule of information that can be obtained in understanding what voodoo is, how voodoo is spelled, how we speak the languages of voodoo, if you will, how voodoo is pronounced. And certainly it suggests lineage, it suggests roots and practice, tradition. It suggests individual and ethnic cultural paths and nuances that influences our demonstration of voodoo independently, individually, and certainly communally, nationally, regionally. It is a ethno-cultural tradition. And much like Ifa, Akan, Ewe practice, Fan practice, various other ethnic group, ethno-cultural traditions, we can use voodoo as an umbrella word to describe various ethno-cultural traditions within the West African and then ultimately in the Pan-African diaspora. Voodoo is affected by ethnicity. It's to have been born, birthed, created, in our understanding, from West Africa. But there are practitioners and elders and mentors that I've met over the years that believe that voodoo may very well even predate West Africa lineage. When we think of spells, incantations, the usage of talismans, altars, shrines, all sorts of medical work, we certainly can think of Kemet, ancient Egypt, and quite possibly forgotten civilizations that existed prior to that. There are certain words that are now sort of universal to Pan-African tradition, like Alafia, for example, that many argue have more of an Arabic, East African roots to it linguistically, as opposed to a word born of Ewe, Fan, or even Yoruba. And so the idea of synchronization, amalgamation, certainly were born long before the Middle Passage, the blending and mixing of family and tradition. I sort of describe it like, we all have a gumbo recipe, but my gumbo not going to taste like Toni Val gumbo, and Toni Val gumbo not going to taste like Lilith gumbo, and Lilith gumbo, not going to taste like Kim P4 gumbo. Because of the uniqueness of the individual, and certainly that feeds lineage, heritage, how a family, how a community does something. So we've come to understand a West African demonstration footprint of voodoo. I like to say root practice and tradition. We have come to understand a Haitian footprint of voodoo practice and tradition, certainly by way of the Middle Passage. And that opens up Central America and South America and certainly North America in terms of a footprint, a demonstration of voodoo. 12 African divisiones in Dominican Republic. Certainly Maria Leonza in Venezuela has elements of ancestral honor and acknowledgement and voodoo within it. What they call Shango in Trinidad and Tobago, practices in Jamaica and throughout the Americas, and certainly voodoo with 4 O's, having its root right here in this beloved New Orleans, Louisiana. And I like to say if every region, every ethnic cultural region is afforded the respect of its traditions, then certainly voodoo with 4 O's belongs to us, those descendants of the Middle Passage born here on this soil of Louisiana, and certainly the Mississippi Delta carried that tradition into further parts of what we now understand to be the United States. So some of the descendants, if you will, of voodoo, we might consider conjure, root work, hoodoo as descendant branches, root branches of this great, now what I like to call voodoo worldwide. For indeed, voodoo is where you find us, you will indeed find voodoo. We discussed also in a prior episode about the footprint of ancestral inheritance and ancestral memory, which we've always understood in Aboriginal and Indigenous cultures and practices that the dead never leave us. They coexist with us, if you will, in another interdimensional space, another spiritual realm. We might talk a little bit about string theory and the idea that more than one thing can be true at the same time, and that we must coexist in at least 10 to 11 intra-dimensional spaces at once in order for our reality to be real. Science has also now supported that ancestral memory, ethnicity, and culture, which are certainly how we live, regionally where we live. You might even consider economics, class, status in terms of live and what we're able to lifestyle, even our spiritual and religious lifestyles. But that pressing ancestral memory that for many of us brought us not only to voodoo, but to the journey of self-discovery, coming from various backgrounds of religious and non-religious. Some of us having that traditional Black church background, whether it be Baptist or Catholic or apostolic or sanctified. And then there are those who have found their way from other cultures and traditions and practices to voodoo. Indeed, who is to say who God calls, who is to say who the ancestors call to practice and operate in the tradition. So I've often said over the years that, arguments over semantics of U's and O's is only relevant to what demonstration, what footprint of voodoo we are talking about. I like how Queen Mother Martinez, Sister Val, talked about not associating what her mother did and the women in her household did with voodoo in the earlier years of her experience until she gained some degree of awareness and understanding and was able to then put those pieces together. And certainly I invite everyone, Lilith, as well, to share your experience. We certainly don't expect us all to share the same experience or even to agree on what the definitions and the experiences are. That's one of the things that make a good podcast, is having a safe and free space for people to disagree, but to also learn and share and be exposed to others' connection to the tradition. We will also in coming shows be inviting some of our NONVD, New Orleans National Voodoo Day community members from other parts of the world to be a part of the podcast. We have some family in Mali with Robert, one of our team members who's married to a Malian and is in Mali right now. And there are some practitioners there who are going to be participating in coming days on the show. I have a practitioner from Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Candomblé and Brazilian voodoo, who I've been friends with going on 7 years now. She will be in coming days joining the show. And we certainly want to invite our Latinx community, Santeria, Lucumi, Paulo, and certainly those who are operating in 21 divisions and various forms of voodoo worldwide, to feel free to come in and share with us as featured guests on the show. Certainly, if you don't have a camera or you aren't comfortable coming on, you can always type your questions, your greetings, or comments in the chat, and we will always do our best to share that. Welcome, Daniel Neal. Greetings and salutations to you and yours. And I see you now, TreeShakers, in the chat. We certainly appreciate you. We know your camera's not here, but we know your mic is working and your presence is felt in the chat. Uh, we have about 35 minutes remaining in the show. Go ahead, Lilith.
I was like, what's the question again? So much information, Divine Prince. It's all amazing. All amazing.
Just for tonight, what is voodoo? But again, understanding that voodoo might take on a different meaning, a different nuance, depending on where you were born, depending on how you were taught or how you were initiated, or how you were educated, depending on your experience. So again, I don't assume that we all came to voodoo in the same way. We all have our individual story to tell about our exposure to voodoo. There's a common misconception that just living in New Orleans makes you voodoo, or makes you automatically connected to Marie Laveau and the practice and the tradition. So again, elaborate a little more on your connection to voodoo.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think I always knew I was voodoo. People ask me, why did you take the name Lilith? And that's the one they gave me. So, I came in with this kind of divine feminine spirituality informed situation. Not that my parents worship Lilith or anything. They just, I think, thought it was a good name for me and it fits. But the whole time I was growing up, I had an aunt. I grew up in New York City. I had an aunt that was obsessed with Marie Laveau, and she used to be a singer. She sung with Bob Dylan and things like that. And she would come in and she'd talk about, like, she could see Marie Laveau in the room with us, and she would start singing all different versions of the Marie Laveau song, the Papa Celestine, all of those and everything like that. So even I remember being 3-4 years old thinking about Marie Laveau as this just sort of beautiful, graceful, powerful, feminine, exotic figure from this magical city called New Orleans. Better than Disney could ever imagine it was what was in my mind. And it was amazing. And I think I just felt so connected and called here. I definitely feel a kinship with others like, Toni Martinez there, talking about growing up, looking at these things like this is just what we did, right? You stir the pot this way, you throw the salt over your shoulder, you don't put your handbag on the floor, all of these things that you do just to keep safe and protected and make sure you can hold on to what's yours and nobody gets any tricks or negativity on you. So I grew up with all of that, not knowing it was magic. And I think I thought everybody did it, and the older I got, the more I realized, what? Y'all don't do any of that? That's really wild. Okay. And I also catch it too. You're talking about Santo and the Kumi and different forms of voodoo and the African traditional religions. A lot of people want to give me flack because I'm initiated in more than one tradition. And I think we see a lot of these people out there that want to go out and initiate in 20 different things all at once. And, that's great. But for me, the only reason I initiated in different traditions was because my daughter was murdered. And in order to get justice in the situation, I went to a friend of mine who was a Santera, and she said, okay, you can have justice. You won't necessarily be happy, but you can at least have some kind of justice in this situation. And if that happens, then you have to initiate in Santo. So that's why I initiated in Santo, and I initiated in Haitian Vodou because I wasn't living in New York or New Orleans. I was living in New England, and I was teaching at a UU church, which is always very open to different spiritualities. I was teaching like tarot and palm reading and stuff like that. And they called me up and they said, we have a Haitian Mambo who went to Harvard Divinity School, and she's going to be our new minister, and you'll love her. And I did. And her name was Gro Mambo Bonnie Devlin. And I was the first person she initiated, and it was amazing, and that was just a connection that I had to her, and it was so special. And unfortunately, Bonnie's no longer with us, but it was such a powerful thing. And I think a lot of people coming to the religion want to know more. And all I can say to them is patience, patience, patience. You know, we get our teachers when the right time comes, and it's usually probably 3, 4, 5, 10 years later than you thought it was going to happen. That's what happened for me. That's what happened for so many people. But that's part of the journey, right? Discovering what the religion is for you and how it's going to best fit in your life and help you. We all have a different path.
Mhm.
Talk about this a lot in Santo or La Regla Lacumi about we have a proper path for ourselves, and getting in line with that proper path is what makes you successful.
Yes, yes. I share in that I initiated in more than one tradition. It was my journey. It was my experience, if you will, of self-discovery. Growing up first in the Black spiritualist church, it looked like a Black Baptist church, but you've got these Catholic saints, in the grand hall coming into the church, and then certain practices that I thought, were regular foot washing and terry services and the like. I had no idea as a child that other churches did not necessarily do that. And then somewhere around 12 or 13, we were some say that's not quite evangelical. Others call it sanctified. But again, there was faith healing, casting out of devils, the usage of anointing oil, all night terry services that didn't last until, that lasted until, 9 a.m. the next day. People, manifesting spirits, and yet still no one called it voodoo. And there was always the shady admonishment from the pulpit of people, particularly women, by the way, who claim connection to spirit or God, was speaking through them, and being in an apostolic environment, women don't speak, are not allowed to speak, didn't wear pants, weren't allowed in positions of leadership. I saw the contradictions, in that regard as well, growing up and growing up in the DMV. Me being born in Chicago, but growing up in Maryland, DC, Virginia area. That's how my polygamous father was able to keep his three families separate, three known families separate. He may have more. Was moving us as far east at that time as he thought possible, and so the availability of Smithsonian Institute, libraries, archives, in Chocolate City in the 1970s, in the 80s, was often free and widely accessible. And so being exposed to ethnocultural tradition and religion started as early as elementary school for me, and then being forced out onto the street at 14 years old gave me what I call the blessing and the liberty to begin to initiate and sit at the foot of elders and mentors from New York City to Los Angeles, and gain access to these systems that I otherwise would not have had access to. So, I didn't wake up one day and decide, I wanted to be a voodoo priest, or, that voodoo was calling me. I do have a similarity in that Marie Laveau is involved in how I ended up in voodoo. I came to New Orleans with a spiritualist church we were forming and creating in Atlanta in the mid to late 1990s. And I was overtaken by the spirit just walking through the French Quarter. It was something about walking through the French Quarter. I was able to hear what wasn't there at the time, horses on cobblestones. I could hear carriages. I could see people in period clothing and costuming. I would trance literally every time I would come into the French Quarter, and we're trying to, have a cocktail and hang out and do the tourist thing, and I was really disoriented and amazed equally by what was happening. And so I made it my business to visit St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which was wide open at that time, and fell down the rabbit hole of, is she here? Is she not here? Is she in a different tomb than the one that people are acknowledging? You know, that whole sort of thing. So I ended up visiting both Cemetery 1, 2, and I don't think I visited any more downtown or centrally located cemeteries at that time, but I did go see Lafayette Cemetery number 1. And it was in that Marie Laveau and the spirits were calling me to New Orleans. I didn't even know that I had any genetic bloodline to New Orleans at that time. I didn't take my first DNA test until the summer after Hurricane Katrina to find that my great-great-grandparents on both sides of my family had some connection to Louisiana, Okaloosa, Louisiana, specifically. So I always felt called by the ancestors and particularly by Marie Laveau to visit and to go into ministry of voodoo. I had always been what we used to say dibbling and dabbling in voodoo in my 20s and in my 30s, but I really didn't take it seriously in terms of ministry, and I would have been in my earlier 30s at that time. Back in those days, and so it has that white plaster that's still adhered to it till this day, and it even has some of the brick, red brick adhered to it on the occasion that I was able to find those worn through spots, and I managed to tap her tomb there, and it's still 30 years later stuck to this tiger eye. So I keep it separated, you know, with my other Marie Laveau implements and ritual items. But it has played a large role even before I moved here. The conversation of Marie Laveau, the, you know, wicked and mysterious books written about her that were, you know, often lies and fanciful and you know, romantic. And all those things sort of went into the gumbo that, you know, drew me here. But my interest and my journey into voodoo, authentic West African voodoo, certainly began long before I moved to Louisiana and New Orleans. Certainly my introduction to Fa, Jaffa, Afa, what many of you understand as Ifa divination, began in California, which afforded me almost like traveling the world in California. You know, people from all over the world are in California and visit California. So you never know who, celebrity, non-celebrity, spiritualist, alien enthusiast, book writer, you never know who you meet, you know, on a good day in Venice Beach, you know, or in Santa Monica, you know, or in LA, you know, in general. So my exposure to the West African traditions and culture began decades before my actual moving to Louisiana. But I believe it's just giving it foundation and giving fuel to my footprint today, my ministry today, and my ultimate goal today, which is the re-empowerment of traditional ethno-cultural traditions, and certainly including, but not exclusively to voodoo, but certainly to revive a more authentic demonstration of voodoo. I'm guilty of, you know, holding a SAG card and contributing to the entertainment and creative elements of voodoo demonstration, Marie Laveau demonstration, American Horror Story demonstration. But I make a clear, and always have made a clear distinction between entertainment and creative license in art and entertainment, as opposed to authentic demonstration of Louisiana voodoo, Haitian voodoo, West African voodoo, and indeed worldwide, voodoo worldwide, as it continues to grow and evolve as we continue to grow, travel, and evolve. I don't want to dominate the remaining 20 minutes of the conversation. I certainly invite my co-hosts to contribute any story or commentary you might want to offer. Thank you so much to all those who are present with us, both listening and certainly to those who are with us now in the chat. I certainly appreciate you. Our beloved Kim P. Ford, TreeShaker Radio, said she didn't realize until she went to college and saw how different she was. And I believe she means, particularly as a Louisiana, as a New Orleans born and raised, and having that tradition and many traditions that, we operate in that people might find odd and unique. What is voodoo? Lilith, I've always believed Mardi Gras was voodoo. Carnival is a demonstration, is a footprint of voodoo. People don't often see it that way, but I don't think it's no coincidence that the float of Oshun and Yemayad, and Zulu are opening up, Fat Tuesday, when you understand what Black masking culture and tradition is, skull and bones. That's your galade. That's your egungun. That's your ancestral masquerade. Your baby dolls. It's another form of ancestral masquerade. Except now you have your elders, your older women, representing the baby, the future, the sunlight that is to come. And certainly our masking Indians, of whom I'm a proud maroon masking Black Indian, are doing so in acknowledgement of the relationship in the arrangement between the Aboriginal and Indigenous people of this land, who assisted the Black man and the enslaved man in his escape into the swamp and the wilderness from this system. Do you agree that Mardi Gras and Carnival are sort of a overt demonstration of voodoo, sort of hidden right out in the open?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, it's not the drunk partying, falling down in the street part of it. It's the other part of it, the sacred part. For the past 10 years, I've got up with, Sun Pie and Northside Skull and Bones and honored the ancestors in the morning with them. And, for me, Mardi Gras is about so much more than just, okay, we're going to have a big party. And I think that's what tourists see, right? And that's what they come for. But there's so much more here that what we're representing. And I was fortunate enough to go to Benin with the New Orleans National Vodou Day people for the Vodou colloquium last summer. And you can see the parallels, the pictures we took there, when we showed them to everybody, it's so obvious that, this Galede here, this Zangbeto, these things are things that we kept here in our culture in New Orleans, and they took their own forms. They mingled with the indigenous people. It turned into the Black masking Indian culture. It turned into all these wonderful mainstays that we're so proud of. And so it's so honoring, like I almost get tears in my eyes when I go out and I see all the little queens and all the little spy boys and see the next generation really embracing their culture and knowing what it is to be proud in that way. Because, for those of us who are a certain age, I won't date us, but for those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, like you and I did, Divine Prince, like it wasn't always something that we could openly be proud of, James Brown had to yell about it because a lot of people didn't think that. A lot of people didn't feel Black and proud. A lot of people didn't understand how important it was to shout that as loud as they could. And now they do. And now they can honor that in that way. And it's amazing to me. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. But I think people miss the point about it and think it's about other things, unfortunately.
Please, Kim P. Ford and Toni Bell. I want the two of you being, sort of raised in New Orleans to share your experience with the fear around Mardi Gras and Carnival and your understanding of to what degree do you think that had to do with not just that, it's an adult activity, but to what degree do you believe voodoo or the voodoo elements of it played a role? Toni, are you with me?
Yes. I never really thought about Mardi Gras or Carnival being associated with voodoo. As a child, it was something that we really didn't participate in our household. Going to Mardi Gras parades and stuff like that growing up. It wasn't until I got older and moved from the Lower Ninth Ward that I began attending Mardi Gras parades and seeing the Black masking Indians. And I never thought about it like that. I thought about when I did think about Mardi Gras, which remember Carnival was to me for Black people. That's your Black masking Indians, your Skull and Bones, and everything else that went off away from the main streets of Mardi Gras on Fat Tuesday. It was two different worlds to me. And when I did stop and think about Mardi Gras and all the stuff that it goes through, to me, I stopped attending it because it was like false god worship to me, the Greek gods. And I didn't want to participate in that anymore. But I didn't make the shift between Mardi Gras. It was just that's an afterthought to me. Basically, that's an afterthought. Coming up, we never associated it with voodoo. But I like the way you said when you said, your gumbo isn't gonna taste like my gumbo or Kim's gumbo or Lily's gumbo, but it's enough alike that when we look at it, we know it's gumbo. And when we taste it, we can taste that, oh yeah, this is good. This is gumbo. It might not be my gumbo or my but I recognize it as gumbo. So that's the way I always felt about voodoo and spirituality and things like that. I had a big issue once I found out what voodoo was, and I had a few other things going on with me as far as seeing stuff before it happened and knowing stuff. My second husband called me a witch. My last husband called me an oracle. They couldn't believe how I knew things without being there, and I could tell it to them, and they get busted. And just where to find things that people had lost. And studying the Bible where they said, suffer a witch to die, and all the negative stuff about people who had second sight and all of this. So I was kind of conflicted. I'm on my own now without my mother's guidance and anyone else's guidance at that time when I was in my 20s, because to bring it up to the majority of people in New Orleans was basically taboo. Oh, we don't talk about that. Oh, we don't know about that, So I just kind of kept it to myself. A lot of people, as I got older, that I were able to talk to about it said I should have honed my gifts. I should have honed my gifts. And I didn't do that out of fear of being rejected and, you know, thought of even weirder. I mean, when I was a little girl, my mom told me, you have gifts, you have special gifts bestowed upon you by the creator, by God. And I knew that all the years I was with her, but yet and still when I got older, I didn't see it as a gift going by cultural taboos and stuff like that. And that's one thing that, you know, I'm kind of mad at myself about, because right now I probably could get rid of Trump if I would have honed my skills.
Listen, it's on my agenda, you know, my political agenda, that we start targeting particular people, places, and things in coming weeks with magical work. Again, some things need to be bound, some things need to be loosed, some things need to be destroyed. And I would really like to see more political activism in the spiritual community in terms of ritual work. And I don't know if Kim is able to unmute her mic. I tried to unmute her. Oh,
I'm
there you go.
unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I want you to talk about, you know, your experience in association with Mardi Gras and Carnival. You know, if and there was any fear.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this, y'all. My grandmother did not care for Mardi Gras at all. At all. Matter of fact, but my mother, my mother and her siblings always wanted to go. We would go, but we could only walk there and we had to stay we were at the back, way at the back. All I could see was the top of the crew of Endymion head. You know, but that's not how. But in my community, you know, there were people in my neighborhood. I grew up in the Saint Bernard Project of the 7th Ward in New Orleans, right? And there were people all over the project that practiced voodoo. Just a lot of people all over the project. It was very commonplace, but no, we were raised to be Baptists, but we were in a voodoo rich community, right? So and it was an eclectic place to be. And I tell you one thing, when I saw what was the name of that show you called up where they had the voodoo in it on HBO?
American Horror Story.
American Horror Story.
Yes.
I was in that. I felt that in real life. I had some real life experiences like that. It was very close to me, y'all. It affected me because I felt like it was kind of real, you know. And I used to work at St. Vincent's Infant and Maternity Home. I also did some time at St. Elizabeth Girls Home before it became you remember the lady who did the vampire movie? Anne Rice, right. But you know, I worked at that place long before she purchased that building, and that place is full of spirits. That place is full of spirits. They ain't gonna never leave there. They gonna always be there. So a part of my life, definitely I've had some experiences with spirits all my life. You know what I mean? Hey, all my life I have. And I didn't even know that that wasn't the norm. I thought everybody had that, you know, because I've been in New Orleans all my life. And I really didn't get how different I was until I went away to college. But the people who were from New Orleans, they all felt like me too, you know, so it wasn't just me, but I knew that people who were from out of town didn't know what we knew, and I know now, you know, and I never can tell you that directly I ever tried to practice any voodoo because I never wanted to. I just never wanted to. And I know enough about it that I just don't want to dabble in that. You know, it's not some place where I want to be able to go. And I feel like but I'm comfortable around it because I've been doing it all my life. You know, I'm in a familiar territory. And it just is what it is. It's just a natural. I can't even see the things that even you're talking about are not things that I actually know about directly. But I do know that I have no, and I've been knowing Marie Laveau since I was a child. I mean, she was talked about and highly revered in my community, you know? So
Listen,
no,
when
but I never went. You
I'm
said
sorry,
what
go
now?
ahead. No, I was
I
gonna say, you know,
never,
go ahead.
I never went to visit her graveyard, her grave site, but I know her granddaughter, great granddaughter, and I've met. I'm sorry, what now? Ava Marie. Can you hear me, Prince
Ava K.
John?
Jones.
Ava K. Jones.
Yeah, you
And Ava K.
Ava K.
Jones.
Jones.
So I, you know, as a young woman, I looked up to her as being like so just like the elite, right? But then my cousin moved right next door to her, and she was the best neighbor and fell in love with her. So nice, so eclectic, and I just loved her also. So I was connected there. I'm just connected with it in a space that it's difficult for me to explain, but I do look and watch. Okay. And that's my voodoo experience.
Yeah, we froze for a moment, but we're back. You know, I've been in New Orleans over 30 years now. When I first came here, you know, I saw voodoo everywhere, but I was shocked at the degree in which locals didn't talk about, didn't see it, or it just wasn't present. I was looking for, you know, the voodoo church. You know, where's the one voodoo church where, you know, people are gathering, and there wasn't any, and I was surprised by that. And even when I started masking Indian 13 years ago, there was a immediate pushback to my being in the community and my wanting to represent sort of the amalgamation of that culture, Indian culture at Voodoo, and how I felt it was being represented in the suits, but also in the demonstration and the performance itself. And so I'm sewing bebes into my suit. At that time, no one else was doing it, and people were trying to shut me down. Then, almost in like what felt like a twinkling of an eye, several people are sewing Marie Laveau, St. Louis Cemetery #1, bebes, voodoo into their suit, and now it's gaining some degree of visibility and outward discussion in the community. I also believe that the changes in technology from Hurricane Katrina till now also have played a role in that. Remember, we had flip phones and there were no smartphones in 2005 going into Hurricane Katrina. And so now everyone has a smart device almost, and the accessibility and availability to books and book authors like Lilith Dorsey, to the culture itself in real time, being streamed live from Benin or live from Togo or live from Louisiana or Haiti, has now just made it much more easily accessible to both Black and non-Black people to access what voodoo is and what authentic demonstrations of voodoo look like. So in our next podcast tomorrow night, for those of who are going to join me, I want to talk a little bit more about the unique demonstration of voodoo, particularly here in New Orleans, but certainly we'll reference Ouida, Benin, and in Haiti. I'm also going to try and coach one of my Haitian friends to come on and join us tomorrow night, someone who's fluent in both Creole and English, to share some of the Haitian voodoo experience and share a little bit more about what we do here at NONVD and with La Source in terms of the Haitian footprint here in New Orleans for voodoo. So I want to thank all of my guests, beloved Lilith Dorsey, Priestess Lilith Dorsey, Queen Mother Toni Val Martinez, community activist, agitator, and organizer Kim P. Ford. I certainly invite you all
Thank
to
you.
join tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, if your schedule certainly will allow. And I invite our listening audience to call in, participate. Certainly, if you wish to turn on your cam with your questions or comments, I'll be more than happy to send the streaming link to you. Otherwise, we certainly appreciate you sharing and visiting with the show on the social media platforms where myself and the co-hosts have shared and will share the show in archive afterwards. So remembering that all is truly and indeed a blessing, if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. Respect the voodoo, no matter. All is a blessing.
All is
Good
a
night,
blessing.
Lilith.
Good night.
All
Good
is a
night,
blessing.
Dennis.
Good night,
Good
Queen.
night, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Good night, Kim.
Hopefully, we'll have a camera tomorrow.
Yes, that'll be great if your
All right.
camera's working tomorrow. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Timothy S. Marie. We'll certainly see you again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you for all the alchemists and all my regular returning guests. Thank you so much, Ashley Marshall. Kawhi Goddess, thank you so much for stopping by and joining us. And we invite you to return on tomorrow night and join the conversation. And we certainly invite you to join us, participate with us, sponsor with us for New Orleans National Voodoo Day, our second annual New Orleans National Voodoo Day, April 5th and 6th, 2025. April 5th will be our symposium organized and administrated by our beloved Lilith Dorsey. And the following day will be our actual day of events. So we invite you to visit us at www.voodooday.org. That's V like Victor, O, D like David, O, U, D like David, AY.org, www.voodooday.org. And I look forward to sitting with you in this sacred space tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you kindly all. Odabo and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bobo.